There are moments in life when God doesn't change the circumstances immediately, but changes something within us. Before any important event, there is a silent period of inner adjustment. It's in this space that many perceive nothing, but the spiritually attentive can feel that something is being prepared. When we say that God reveals something before it is fulfilled, we're not talking about exact dates or spectacular announcements. We're talking about perception, about focus, about spiritual direction. God doesn't act in a disorganized way. He prepares the inside before allowing the outside to manifest. Many people go through life reacting to what happens, but few learn to perceive what is being revealed beforehand. This is one of the great spiritual distinctions, not living only in the impact of the event, but in the alignment that precedes it. Before real change, God usually calls for silence. He reduces distractions. He confronts excess. He redirects the gaze. Not because he wants to create fear, but because he wants to prepare the heart for what is coming. These 24 hours are not just chronological time. They represent a state of spiritual attentiveness, a period when the focus shifts from the problem and returns to the source. Those who ignore this moment enter unprepared. Those who perceive it walk through it with greater clarity. This video is about that, what God reveals before he acts, and how the right focus completely transforms the experience of what's to come. Before we continue, follow the channel and share it with your fellow chosen ones. When God is about to allow something important, he doesn't start with the event. He starts with the focus. This is a point many ignore. People wait for external signs, clear warnings, or visible changes. But God acts first on the inside. He adjusts the direction of the gaze before allowing reality to change. Fear always tries to come first. It creates scenarios, projects tragedies, and demands immediate answers. But God doesn't work through anxiety. He works through clarity. When someone starts feeling a call to be silent, to slow down, or to reorganize priorities, it's not by chance. It's alignment. Many confuse spiritual restlessness with a negative premonition. But most of the time, that restlessness is simply the focus being shifted. Things that once filled the mind begin to lose importance. Distractions start to exhaust. Certain topics no longer hold attention. That's revelation in the form of adjustment. God does not reveal by creating panic. He reveals by creating awareness. When the focus is right, even difficult situations are faced with greater strength. When the focus is wrong, even simple things become heavy. That's why, before allowing any external change, God works internally. There are people who go through major events emotionally and spiritually unprepared. Not because God failed, but because they ignored the time of adjustment. Others go through similar situations with surprising peace. The difference is not in what happened, but in the focus developed beforehand. When the focus is on God, the mind slows down. That doesn't mean the absence of thoughts, but the absence of their control. The person begins to observe more and react less. This is essential because decisions made under fear rarely produce good fruit. God knows that if the focus remains only on problems, any revelation becomes a burden. But when the focus is on him, the revelation becomes direction. That is why he constantly calls for attention, stillness, and presence before acting. This process is not comfortable for everyone. Adjusting focus requires letting go of distractions, excesses, and even certain relationships. But without that adjustment, the person enters repeated cycles, always reacting, never discerning. God reveals beforehand because he prepares. He doesn't throw someone into the unknown without first strengthening the inner being. When the focus changes, the person begins to notice things they previously ignored. Not because reality changed, but because the gaze matured. This is one of the greatest signs that something is being prepared. When fear loses strength and clarity begins to grow, even without complete answers, the right focus doesn't eliminate challenges, but prevents them from taking over. Most people live at the mercy of circumstances. Everything that happens around them determines their emotional state, their decisions, even their faith. When things go well, there is peace. When something gets out of control, despair sets in. This kind of life is unstable and exhausting. The very word circumstance reveals this. It refers to what is around, the environment, external conditions. Living focused only on that means handing over emotional control to factors that constantly change. God never called anyone to live like that. When the focus is on circumstances, the mind enters a constant state of alert. Thought runs ahead to the future, tries to predict losses, anticipates problems. This generates anxiety and weakens spiritual discernment. The person starts reacting, not perceiving. God constantly invites us to look beyond what's around us, not to ignore reality, but to not be dominated by it. The problem is not recognizing difficulties. It's allowing them to occupy the entire field of vision. Those who live only looking at circumstances rarely perceive what God is doing behind the scenes, because they are too busy trying to control what cannot be controlled. That excessive control blocks spiritual perception. Before major changes, God often interrupts this cycle. He calls for stillness. He reduces stimuli. He even allows certain voids. All of it to shift the focus. It's not punishment, it's preparation. Many interpret this moment as abandonment, but in truth, it's an invitation to spiritual maturity. God doesn't want people dependent only on favorable scenarios. He wants people who are grounded, able to walk through change without losing their center. When the focus shifts from circumstances and turns to God, something essential happens. The person begins to respond, not just react. They observe before deciding. They pray before acting. They listen before speaking. This doesn't eliminate problems, but it prevents them from defining everything. Life stops being a sequence of emotional crises and gains more internal stability, even when the external scenario is uncertain. God reveals beforehand precisely to break this dependence on circumstances. He wants the interior to be aligned before the exterior moves. Those who understand this go through change with more clarity and less wear. The danger of living trapped by circumstances is not in what happens outside. It's in what is lost inside. Peace, discernment, and direction. And that is exactly what God works on first, when something is about to be fulfilled. Not always what distances someone from God is obvious error or declared sin. Many times, it's constant distraction, a mind that's too busy, a heart that's too full, a schedule that's too packed. When everything competes for attention, discernment is lost. God speaks, but the person doesn't perceive it. Distraction is dangerous because it doesn't look like a threat. It disguises itself as routine, productivity, harmless entertainment. But little by little, it takes up the space that should belong to spiritual attention. The result is a life lived on autopilot, without awareness of what is being prepared. When God is about to fulfill something important, He usually reduces distractions, not because He wants to deprive, but because He wants to align. Often, certain activities start to feel tiring. Certain conversations no longer make sense. Certain habits lose their shine. This is not by chance. It's a sign of adjustment. The problem is that many resist this process. They try to fill the silence. They seek more stimulation, more noise, more busyness. And by doing so, they miss the chance to perceive what God is revealing before He acts. Distraction also weakens faith, not because the person stops believing, but because they start living in reaction to everything around them. News, opinions, comparisons, external pressures. Everything starts dictating the emotional state. The heart ceases to be anchored. God doesn't reveal by shouting over the noise. He reveals when there is space, when the mind slows down, when focus is organized. That's why before many fulfillments there is a period of withdrawal, even if involuntary. The spiritually attentive perceive this. They don't see silence as emptiness, but as opportunity. They know that when everything becomes quiet, something is being aligned. When the excess falls, the essential appears. Living distracted doesn't stop God from acting, but it does stop the person from understanding what's happening. They enter important events confused, reactive, and emotionally unstable. But those who perceive the time of adjustment enter with more clarity. God reveals beforehand so that the person isn't surprised on the inside, even if surprised on the outside. Distraction steals that preparation. That's why, when attention starts being drawn inward, when noise begins to bother, it's a sign that something is being prepared. Ignoring this is to lose discernment. Embracing it is to mature spiritually. God never acts only on the outside. Before any visible change, He works on the inside. This is a constant spiritual principle. When someone understands this, they stop demanding immediate answers and begin to observe what is being adjusted within themselves. Many people want God to change situations, people, or scenarios. But they ignore that. Without inner preparation, external change can become a burden. What isn't sustained by internal maturity ends up creating confusion. That's why before fulfilling, God prepares. He works on character, posture, focus, and discernment. This isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it involves frustrations, delays, or silences. But all of that is part of the alignment. When God reveals something before it is fulfilled, He doesn't give the event itself. He gives the emotional and spiritual condition necessary to go through it. This prevents pride when the answer is positive and prevents despair when the path is difficult. Inner preparation also prevents mistaken interpretations. Without it, a person may see a blessing as a threat or a challenge as abandonment. With it, their perspective is adjusted. Their reading of reality becomes clearer. God knows that many people are not ready for what they're asking for. That's why the waiting time is not absence of response, but a time of internal construction. Focus is adjusted. Priorities are reviewed. Excessive dependence on circumstances is broken. Those who ignore this process enter unprepared. Those who embrace it enter strengthened. The difference is not in what happens, but in how one is inside when it happens. Inner preparation also reveals limits. God shows what needs to be left behind, what cannot be carried forward. Certain attitudes, relationships, or habits do not pass into the next phase. Revelation comes before the cut. This process is a form of care. God does not throw someone into something new without first aligning what needs to sustain that new thing. When this is understood, silence ceases to be a cause for anxiety and becomes a space for formation. The greatest proof that something is being prepared is not external agitation, but internal work. When focus changes, when vision matures, when reaction decreases, God is preparing. And when the external finally moves, the one who was prepared does not get lost. When God begins to reveal something before it is fulfilled, one of the first noticeable changes is internal reorganization. It's not that the problems disappear immediately, but the way they occupy the mind changes. The focus begins to shift from anxiety to direction. This is a clear sign that something is being prepared. Many people believe they need complete answers to have peace. But true peace doesn't come from answers. It comes from alignment. When the focus is on God, even without understanding everything, the person feels stability. They don't have all the explanations, but they know where they're anchored. This adjustment of focus is usually subtle. Sometimes it comes as exhaustion from too much information. Other times as disinterest in useless discussions. In some cases, as a need for silence. All of this is part of an inner realignment. God doesn't push, He directs. When the focus shifts, the mind stops running in circles. The person begins to see what truly matters and what was just taking up space. Repetitive worries lose strength. Obsessive thoughts begin to dissolve. Not because the person fought them, but because they stopped feeding them. This process is neither immediate nor magical. It happens when attention is trained to return to the essential. And the essential, in this context, is not the problem. It's the source. God doesn't call anyone to deny reality, but to not be dominated by it. Those who learn to adjust their focus begin to notice that decisions become clearer, not because everything got easy, but because the mind is less polluted. Confusion decreases when the excess falls away, and that makes a difference before any fulfillment. God knows that if the focus remains scattered, a person may enter a new season, carrying old patterns. That's why the time before fulfillment is often a time of internal organization. It's when the person learns to discern what deserves attention and what can be released. When the focus is in the right place, the person becomes less reactive. They don't respond impulsively to everything. They observe, think, pray, and only then act. That space between stimulus and response is one of the greatest signs of spiritual maturity. Life starts to organize itself because the inner life is being organized, and that prevents many unnecessary damages. How many situations became chaotic not because of the event itself, but because of how disorganized they were internally? God works to prevent that. The right focus also changes how signs are interpreted. Without alignment, everything looks like a threat or an exaggerated expectation. With alignment, signs are read with sobriety. There's no panic or euphoria. There is attentiveness. This stability doesn't come from control, but from trust. The person doesn't need to dominate everything to feel safe. They learn to trust the direction, even when the path is not fully visible. That's why when God reveals something before it is fulfilled, He begins by adjusting the focus, because focus determines the experience, and a well-lived experience begins with a well-positioned gaze. Another essential aspect of revelation that precedes fulfillment is the relationship with time. Most people live in conflict with time, either stuck in the past or anxious about the future. Few manage to stay attentive to the present. God works exactly on that point. When something is about to be fulfilled, God does not accelerate anxiety. He teaches how to wait, not like someone folding their arms, but like someone who remains alert. To wait, spiritually, is not inactivity. It's readiness without despair. The person who learns to wait doesn't live counting hours or days. They live aligning their inner world. Time stops being the enemy and becomes an ally. Each moment is used to strengthen posture, not to feed restlessness. Those who don't learn to wait enter fulfillment unprepared. They want everything fast. They want guarantees. They want control. But God's timing doesn't serve an impatient ego. It serves the purpose. These symbolic 24 hours before fulfillment represent exactly that, a space where time slows down so perception can deepen. Those who insist on rushing miss important details. Those who learn to wait notice the fine adjustments. God reveals beforehand to teach the person not to anticipate emotionally. Excessive anticipation creates frustration. Uncontrolled expectation leads to a fall. Preparation involves learning to remain steady without needing constant confirmation. When a person matures in waiting, the fear of delay decreases. They understand that what is sustained by God is not lost through time. On the contrary, it becomes stronger. Waiting also reveals intentions. During that period, it becomes clear what is a legitimate desire and what is disguised anxiety. What remains steady during the wait is usually what truly matters. God uses time to filter out unrealistic expectations, misguided motivations, and emotional dependencies. What doesn't make it through the wait wouldn't sustain the fulfillment. That's why those who learn to wait become more stable, less wavering, less dependent on external signs. Trust stops being in the when and shifts to the who. Time stops being a threat because the person is no longer trying to control it. They learn to live the now with attentiveness, without the rush to escape it. This generates real peace, not artificial. When the fulfillment arrives, those who have waited well do not get lost. They are not overly exalted, nor do they despair. They recognize the movement as a continuation of the process, not something isolated. God reveals beforehand to teach us to wait, and those who learn to wait go through any fulfillment with maturity, clarity, and balance. When God reveals something before it is fulfilled, the greatest purpose is not to inform, but to prepare. The fulfillment itself is only one stage of the process. What truly matters is who the person has become by that moment. That's why those who perceive the revelation do not get lost when the scenario finally changes. Many people enter new phases of life emotionally immature, spiritually disorganized, and mentally overwhelmed. The result is that what should have been progress becomes a burden. God prevents this by preparing the inner self before moving the outer circumstances. Those who learn to perceive the time of revelation enter fulfillment with stability. They are not overtaken by euphoria when something goes right, nor by despair when something proves difficult. There is an internal foundation built during the alignment process. That foundation is formed when a person learns to listen more than speak, observe more than react, and trust more than control. None of this happens automatically. It is the result of continuous attention. It is the result of keeping the focus in the right place. Fulfillment is not the end of the journey. It is only the continuation of what was already being worked on internally. That's why those who ignore the preparation time tend to become frustrated. Those who respect this time move forward with greater clarity. Another important point is that revelation does not eliminate responsibility. God doesn't reveal so that the person can sit back and wait for everything to happen on its own. He reveals so that the posture is correct when it's time to act. Those who understand this neither become complacent nor desperate. They act when it is time to act. They wait when it is time to wait. Discerning these moments is one of the greatest signs of spiritual maturity. When fulfillment arrives, many illusions fall away too. Unrealistic expectations are confronted. Fantasies are replaced by reality. Those who have been prepared are not shaken by this. They understand that the purpose was never to please the ego, but to align life. Inner preparation also prevents a person from getting lost in comparisons. They do not measure their path by the path of others. They are neither rushed nor delayed by outside influence. They learn to recognize their own pace. Throughout this video, it became clear that God does not act randomly. Before something is fulfilled, He prepares. Before a change happens on the outside, He adjusts something on the inside. And this preparation is almost never loud. It happens in focus, in silence, in the way a person begins to see their own life. Many expect God to speak only through extraordinary events, but most revelations come in a discreet way. They come when the mind slows down, when certain distractions lose meaning, when the heart begins to realize that something needs to be adjusted before moving forward. It is in this space that revelation happens. The 24 hours before is not a literal timer. It represents a spiritual state, a moment when God draws attention to what is essential, a period when the focus shifts from fear, anxiety, and circumstances and returns to Him. Those who ignore this moment enter unprepared. Those who perceive it cross with clarity. The big problem is not facing challenges, but facing them without inner alignment. Without focus, even a blessing can become a burden. With focus, even a challenge becomes a lesson. That is why God works within us first. He doesn't just want to change situations, He wants to form posture. When the focus is correct, life doesn't become perfect, but it becomes stable. Emotions stop swinging so much. Decisions stop being impulsive. Fear loses space. Trust grows, even when not everything is clear yet. This process requires maturity. It requires learning to wait without despairing. It requires releasing excessive control. It requires recognizing that not everything needs to be solved immediately. Sometimes what God is doing is preparing you so you won't get lost when the answer comes. Those who learn to perceive the revelation before fulfillment do not get confused afterward. They don't become overly excited when something goes right. They don't fall apart when something is difficult. They recognize that everything is part of a greater path, sustained by direction, not by chance. If this video spoke to you, it's because on some level you recognize this process happening in your life right now. Not as a prediction, but as preparation. Not as fear, but as alignment. Now comment. In what area of your life do you feel God is adjusting your focus at this moment?